Hello and welcome to Online with SFFP. My name is Kathy Rose O'Regan. I am the Executive Director of San Francisco Film Preserve. At SFFP, the San Francisco Film Preserve is a film preservation focused organization based in San Francisco. Our mission is to restore, preserve, and provide access to the world's cinematic heritage, ensuring works of cinema remain accessible for future generations. Through education, advocacy, and collaboration, we aim to inspire a deeper appreciation for the art of film while safeguarding its cultural significance for years to come. We are currently working on multiple film restoration projects, and we just premiered our restoration of Lewis Milestone's The Garden of Eden last month at the Il Cinema Ritrovato Film Festival in Bologna. For those of you who live in the Bay Area, we are co-presenting an event with the Tenderloin Museum at Great American Music Hall on Saturday, July 26th. This special Sounds of the Tenderloin program will explore the silent film era in the Tenderloin neighbourhood. I myself will present on the history of Tenderloin film exchanges. Jim Van Buskirk and SF Neon will discuss Market Street movie marquees, and then Clubfoot Orchestra will accompany two Buster Keaton films live. The two films are One Week and Daydreams. It promises to be a really wonderful event in one of my very favourite venues in the world. So if you would like to learn more about this event, please visit filmpreserve.org/events. So, in addition to restoring and preserving works of cinema, SFFP is dedicated to advocating for the endlessly fascinating, utterly painstaking work being undertaken worldwide to preserve and provide access to moving images. We started this monthly online series to highlight just some of the incredible things happening in the world of film preservation. Today's presentation will be followed by a Q&A, so if you have any questions at all, please just pop them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So today we are absolutely delighted to be joined by one of my fellow country people, Dr. Veronica Johnson. Veronica is an early and silent film historian, currently working on a history of the Film Company of Ireland. She has lectured at University of Galway and Maynooth University and is co-editor and book review editor for the Historical Journal of Film, Radio and Television. She was also recently elected as a council member of the International Association for Media and History. Today's presentation is the fascinating story of the Film Company of Ireland. Veronica will introduce us to this little-known company, examining their approach to filmmaking, the setbacks they encountered, the beauty of their first feature film, their attempt to break into the American market, and the importance of co-owner Nell O'Mara Sullivan to the company's success. So, without further ado, I would like to invite to the screen Veronica Johnson.
Hi, Kathy. Hi, everyone. How are you? Thanks so much. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'd like to thank Kathy very much for this invitation, or as I heard somebody say recently, to thank her for the honour and the stress. But I am very happy to be here and to talk about the Film Company of Ireland, Ireland's first indigenous fiction film company. And I'd also like to thank Kathy and Rob for the amazing work they do in restoring silent film and making it so accessible for all of us to watch. So I'll start my slides now. So this presentation is based on research I have been doing for a long time, a very long time. And one of the reasons that it's taken so long is that there is no archive belonging to this film company. So the research kind of involves going to different places and trying to find information and doing the trawl through newspapers. But from doing all that, a story of this really unique and quite little known film company is beginning to emerge. There has been some work done on it by scholars such as my colleague in Maynooth University, Dennis Condon. Diogo Connell has also written on this, as has Donna Casella for the Women Film Pioneers project as well. But there's no comprehensive history of the Film Company of Ireland. So that's my project at the moment, is to write a book about this, even within scholarly circles, little known company. So what I'm going to do tonight is tell you that story. I'm going to tell it to you in chronological order, pulling out some highlights that I think will be of interest. I'd be thrilled to answer any questions you have at the end of the presentation, or later on by email if you'd like to get in touch that way. And also, if you know anything about any of the people I mentioned here tonight that you think I might not, please do get in touch and let me know. Okay. We will start in 1916, okay, an auspicious year in Ireland, the year of the Easter Rising. A month before that, we have the establishment of the Film Company of Ireland, established by James Mark Sullivan, the man you see here on the right, and another gentleman called Henry Fitzgibbon. They established this company on the 3rd of March 1916 with the aim to make and distribute motion pictures. Very ambitious. As far as we can see, none of them had any background in filmmaking before. And they get a mention in the British Trade Journal, the Bioscope, which I'll talk about a lot during this talk. The Bioscope was a magazine or a journal for cinema managers and cinema owners. And they advertise about the Film Company of Ireland quite a lot. So a month later, the Bioscope says that this company is going to make 40 films a year. What an ambition. They didn't quite get there. In the space of 4 years, they made about 30 films. Most of those were short fiction films. Some of them were what's called scenics, so very short films of scenery. None of those short films and none of the scenics are still in existence, which is a real shame. Particularly the scenics, I would like to see those because they have a reputation for being particularly wonderful for filming scenery and for for capturing the essence of a place on film. However, they did make 2 feature-length films, and we still have those. And those are in the Irish Film Archive, which is also, sorry, I realised I haven't labelled my slides here. That logo comes from the Irish Film Archive as well, the logo of the Film Company of Ireland, with the Irish Wolfhound. I'll talk about that in a moment. So the 2 feature-length films are called Knock na Gao, and that's directed by Fred O'Donovan, made in 1918. And the second feature film is called Willie Riley and His Colleen Bawn, and that's directed by John McDonagh in 1920. Okay, we have those films. So James Mark Sullivan looking very grand there. That picture is from the Library of Congress. Henry Fitzgibbon, I don't have a picture of him. He seems to have disappeared very early on. He went to America in autumn 1916 on business for the company. He kind of flits in and out of the company. As far as I can understand, he was possibly just an investor. Excuse me. When he was, his address was listed when the company was established as the Gresham Hotel in Dublin, indicating maybe he was kind of, passing through Dublin, or maybe he had a person who invested in a lot of different companies. In any way, the core of the company is James Mark Sullivan on the right, and on the left, Ellen, known as Nell O'Mara Sullivan, James's wife. She, in my research, is coming to the forefront as being the heart and soul and life of the company. So while the official record will show that it's James and Henry who set up the company, it is a company that belongs to Nell and James, and they run it together. They married in 1910. James was Irish American, born in County Killarney. He emigrated as a young boy with his parents to America, was educated at Yale, became a lawyer, came back to Ireland a bit and met Nell there. Nell was from an incredibly wealthy family that was incredibly well connected politically. Her parents ran a very successful pig and bacon business. She was well educated. She was extremely well travelled. She was cosmopolitan. And she and James left Ireland in 1910 when they got married, of course, because his job was back in America. And they returned. They returned there. They lived there for a couple of years. And in a very weird quirk of this story, there are many quirks in this story. James, who'd kind of been on the fringes of politics, democratic politics at that time in America, was appointed to be ambassador and minister plenipotentiary for Santo Domingo. It's a very strange story. So they spent some time there. He left under kind of shady circumstances, and they returned to Ireland in 1915 and set up the Film Company of Ireland in 1916 in number 16 Henry Street, which is, I don't have my cursor, but on the right-hand side, you see the building that is closest to all that have fallen down. that's roughly where number 16 Henry Street was. These are pictures taken after the Easter Rising of 1916. So they established their company, they set up offices, they get equipment. I think they even might have started making films, and a month later it all disappears. It all is gone. The first setback in many that this company had. A month later they move premises. Okay, so they're full of energy, they're full of brio, they're full of get up and go, they're full of determination. Everything is lost, and a month later they set up offices in Dame Street. Dame Street is actually particularly significant because it was kind of a little enclave of the film business in Ireland. While this is the only indigenous Irish film company at the time, there were a lot of companies which had distribution offices in Ireland, including the French company Gaumont and Fox in the US. And there's also a really nice cinema there as well. So they're kind of locating themselves then kind of in the heart of film world in Dublin in 1916. Um, they got themselves back on their feet so much that in August 1916, they actually released their first film. And this is a film called O'Neill of the Glen. And it's directed by a man called J.M. Kerrigan, who was an actor in the Abbey Theatre. And it's the relationship of the Film Company of Ireland to the Abbey that I want to talk about now. So just a brief recap on the Abbey. Some of you might be incredibly familiar with it. But if you bear with me, there's some things about it that I want to pull out for the sake of this talk. Okay, so the Abbey Theatre was established in 1904, and it was a theatre that developed a natural style of acting, a realistic style of acting, as many national theatres did at that stage. There was there was a pulling away from the melodramatic style of acting to something that was more realistic. And this style of acting particularly suited the peasant plays that were in production in the Abbey at that time. And that were performed there as part of the Celtic revival of Irish culture. The Abbey Theatre was set up as a union of two different societies. First of all, the National Dramatic Society, which was established by actors. So this was the acting part of the Abbey, established by the brothers Frank and William Fay. And the other society was the Irish Literary Theatre, and this was established by the playwrights Lady Augusta Gregory, Edward Martin, and W.B. Yeats. So these two societies came together, the Actors Society, the Literary Society, and formed the Abbey in 1904. By 1916, the Abbey is very well established in Ireland, in the UK, and in the US, where it had toured extensively. This natural style of acting, as well as being kind of a part of the Celtic revival, along with the peasant plays, was also a reclamation of the stage Irish man and the stage Irish woman that had been such a feature of English and American popular culture, had been embedded in that culture for such a long time. And just a brief comment on the Film Company of Ireland doing this, hiring actors from the theatre who had no experience at all of acting for film up until this point. It was a clever move in lots of ways, but it was also very much in line with what other film companies were doing at that time. So film in the 1910s wasn't really respectable type of entertainment. Okay, it wasn't really a respectable type of entertainment. It was considered, ephemeral. It was considered spectacular and good enough for the working classes, but really not for anybody else. And theatre owners were very keen to get the middle classes into the cinema. And one of the ways that was done was to get stage actors who are well known and well respected to appear on film. So in America and in the US, sorry, in America and in the UK, there were lots of money was paid for actors to do like small pieces on film, so small adaptations of Shakespeare. So in that way, they could say that, we have this famous actor in our film that makes it slightly more respectable, or to use John Burroughs' term, legitimizing cinema. So the Film Company of Ireland were right on trend in hiring these actors. So these two men that you're looking at here, J.M. Kerrigan and Fred O'Donovan, are the two most significant actors from the Abbey that were hired by the Film Company of Ireland. Kerrigan had joined the Abbey in 1906, and O'Donovan had joined the Abbey about 2 years later in 1908. Both of them acted in over like 700 productions for the Abbey. They were very well known in acting circles and cultural circles, and very well known as Abbey actors at the time. I'll start with Kerrigan. So Kerrigan was a particularly important find for the Film Company of Ireland. Not only was he an established actor, but he was what we would call, I suppose, a character actor today. So he played smaller roles, character roles, comic roles. Excellent. All of his reviews are completely excellent. But in addition to being a actor, he also was a tutor of the Abbey style of acting, this natural, realistic style of acting. So he had inherited parts that would have been played by the Fae initially. And so he seems to have been very enthusiastic about the Film Company of Ireland. He seems to have also acted as kind of like a casting director for the company as well, saying which particular actors for the Abbey would have been useful in particular roles. And there's some evidence that he might have invested. Might have invested in the company as well. O'Donovan, on the other hand, had the leading man roles within the Abbey. Again, very quickly established himself there. In addition to acting at the Abbey, he also began directing plays in the Abbey in 1917 and became the general manager of the Abbey in that same year. So both of them start working for the Film Company of Ireland in the summer 1916, and that's when the Abbey takes a hiatus every year. It doesn't operate in the summer months. In autumn 1916, they return to the Abbey, but I just want to show because it's clear that they're very much connected to the film company. And we can see this from this news clipping from September, in which the Abbey is announcing its forthcoming programme. Quote, Monday next, the 25th instant, sees the opening of the Abbey Theatre for the season. The first play will be John Bull's Other Island, in which Mrs. O'Donovan and Kerrigan will appear by permission of the Film Company of Ireland. This is really quite extraordinary. This is really quite extraordinary. This is a film company that's only been in operation for a few months, saying to the Abbey Theatre, which has been in operation for over a decade at this point, we will let you have your actors back by permission for this play. So there's a lot going on there that I haven't quite untangled yet, but I'll pull out what I have. One is that the Film Company of Ireland never missed an opportunity to connect their films to the Abbey. Okay, they never missed an opportunity to connect their films to the Abbey because they knew the cultural standing that the Abbey Theatre had. So O'Donovan then, for the next 4 years that the Film Company of Ireland was in operation, O'Donovan divided his time between the Abbey Theatre and the Film Company of Ireland. And in 1917, I don't know how he managed it all, because he directed 2 films for the company. He directed plays for the Abbey. He acted in those 2 films for the company, acted in the Abbey, and he also became general manager of the Abbey. Kerrigan stayed with the Film Company of Ireland. He seemed to make a clean break from the Abbey. He came back to do the occasional role in the Abbey in the 20s, but really he tied his fortune to the Film Company of Ireland. In autumn of 1916, he went to America to learn about production in California, and he came back in January 1917 and continued to make films with the company then. So I want to look at the first film then that the company made, and this again was called O'Neill of the Glen, directed by Kerrigan, and it has its premiere at the Bohemian Picture House in the suburb of Fisborough in Dublin on August 8th, 1916. The film was incredibly warmly received, as you might imagine, for a first film from an indigenous Irish film company would be in the heady year of 1916. However, it does seem as if there was something quite unique about this film, and I'd like to point out some of these elements. First of all, as well as promoting it as a film directed by an Abbey actor, the company also made publicity of the fact that it was an adaptation of a novel from a popular Irish writer, M.T. Pender. Both of these choices of an Irish director and an adaptation of an Irish novel made a clear statement that the company intended to work with Irish material. While the reviews in the Irish press were enthusiastic, as you might expect, it's useful to note one comment made by the British trade journal, The Bioscope, and that's what you're looking at on screen here, is a page from The Bioscope. However, this is not the review. So the Bioscope did a review. It's very impressed by the film, and it's very impressed by the acting in particular. And in that review it states, and I quote, "Each distinctive part is played with singularly realistic naturalness," end quote. And I think this indicates that the Abbey style of natural acting was a part of the films from the start. What's on screen, so that was the review, but what's on screen is, as you see, it's a half page just talking about the opening night, just talking about the premiere. So it really was giving a lot of publicity to this film company. I don't know if I can move that. I won't try, but I can read it out. So the quote at the top says, "All last week, crowded houses at the Bohemian Picture House. I can't read it, sorry. Show appreciation in no uncertain terms. Sexual openness of this film, produced in Ireland by an Irish director and by Irish players." The quote at the bottom then is from the manager of the Bohemian Picture House, saying, "Not only have I been packed solid all the week since Monday with O'Neill of the Glen, but I'm practically booked out for the remaining 2 days. I expected that the film would undoubtedly score a certain success, but I never anticipated such an absolutely wholehearted appreciation by every person who's seen it, and the music at the pay box has kept time with the orchestra throughout." So enthusiasm, enthusiasm, enthusiasm. From everybody. It would be great if we had this film to see. Following on from this, so the 8th of August, 10 days later, there's a press release from the Film Company of Ireland to indicate that their second film is going to start screening. Is a film called The Miser's Gift. And in early September, the company decamped to County Kerry. They decamped to County Kerry and they make films there. They had no studio, okay? They had no studio. And if you get a chance to watch Knocknagow, you'll see some of the interior scenes are clearly filmed on location. You can see the breeze kind of flapping even indoors. So they had no company, so they moved to County Kerry to make their films there for lots of reasons. I think one, like American film companies, they were chasing daylight. So a little bit more daylight in Kerry in September than there would be in Dublin, a little bit further south. They made a number of films there called The 11th Hour, The Girl of Glenbeigh, The Widow Malone, and An Unfair Love Affair. All of these films were released. All of them are short films. They released to great success in England and in Ireland. And the company really had an amazing first year. I mean, really had an amazing first year. 1917, second year, was more eventful. And I want to start talking about it by talking about the work done by Nell Sullivan. Here she is again. So to recap, Nell is wealthy, educated, well-travelled. When she met and married James Mark Sullivan in 1910. Their marriage seems to be really quite incredible. It seems to be a very strong partnership in every sense of the word. Certainly they worked very well together to ensure the success of the film company from the beginning. Letters from Nell's nephew indicate that she was involved from the start in the day-to-day running of the company in a type of producer role, I guess we would call it today. She was part of the delegation that decamped to Kerry in autumn 1916, and she may have even helped choose the location as she had family living in that area. 1917, what a year for this company. I was going to make a chart, but I think a chart would be maybe too boring because there's a lot of financial stuff. I will try and make it as clear as possible, but they really had a horrendous year financially. March of that year, Nell's sister, a woman called Mary Rinn, invests £600 in the company. Ostensibly, she's buying shares, but there are no shares to buy. This all seems somehow tied up with Henry Fitzgibbon not giving permission for the shares to be allocated. So they're running out of money. Her sister invests £600. Nell herself invests £1,000. So £1,600 is a lot of money in 1917. all of this was put forward, all of this money was put forward to ensure that their first feature-length film would be made. This was a huge undertaking for the company, much bigger, much more expensive than anything they had done before. However, £1,600 doesn't seem to be enough, because in June of that year, the company was in the court seeking liquidation of its assets. And in September of that year, it was back in the courts and the liquidation was granted so that the company could be sold to Ellen for £1,000. So here we have it, September 1917. Ellen Nell O'Mara Sullivan becomes the owner of the Film Company of Ireland. From this moment, she is the legal owner of the Film Company of Ireland. She is officially Ireland's first female film pioneer. I'm very grateful for this moment because, as anybody who is out there trying to find the history of women within film in this period, they often get hidden. They often kind of just disappear from view. So we have this moment where she's officially the owner of the company. So it's thanks to the intervention of Nell that we now have the film Knocknagow. For when all of this financial difficulty was happening throughout 1917, the film was being made in County Tipperary. The film is an adaptation of the novel Knocknagow, or The Homes of Tipperary by Charles Kickham. Written and set in 1879, it tells the stories of the inhabitants of the fictional townland of Knocknagow, based on Kickham's own home place of Mullinahone in Tipperary. For any of you who know it, you will agree that it is a long and rambling story. It has no real main character as such, because the focus is on the community. Okay, so the focus is on the community of Knocknagow and how the people in that community represent everything that is good in the Irish character. The narrative in the novel is episodic. There are some 5 or 6 character stories being followed at any one time. And the film is an incredibly faithful adaptation of the novel. It eliminates some parts for clarity and length, but otherwise it sticks closely to the novel, with one main difference, which I'll talk about shortly. So the film places the events of the story firmly in 1848, putting the setting of the film right in the heart of the Irish famine, and I would argue allowing the film to comment, however obliquely, on the political situation in Ireland at the time of its making, in a moment when a direct commentary wouldn't have been possible. So as I said, the Film Company of Ireland had no studio. Oh, sorry, just to explain, that's what you see here is a advertising the premiere of the film in County Tipperary in Magner Cinema in Clonmel. The premiere was on the 30th of January 1918. And just to note that it is Charles Kickham's Knocknagow that is produced by the Film Company of Ireland. So again, like with the Abbey, they're making this very strong connection with Kickham, not only for the cultural standing of a novel versus a film, but also because this novel was so well loved in Ireland. It was so well known. Every house in Ireland would have had a copy of it. And even if you'd never read the novel, you would know the main events from the novel. It was frequently adapted as a stage play, but by amateur and professional companies. So it was Charles Kickham's. Knocknagow. Okay. So a little bit about production. The adaptation was undertaken by Mrs. N.F. Patton, and this work was in progress in April. Interestingly, both Nell's granddaughter, Mary Rose Callahan, and Diogo O'Connell have suspicions that Nell might have been involved in the adaptation. We've no evidence of that. I'd love if some of that evidence come to light. It doesn't seem unlikely, but officially it is Mrs. N.F. Patton who's doing the adaptation. Filming seems to have begun in late June, early July, with post-production taking place in July and August. Making the film in the locations where the novel was set, the fictional Knocknagow, but really in Mullinahone, reveals again one of the core values held by the Film Company of Ireland to produce authentic Irish films with a genuine Irish atmosphere. As the film opens, we are introduced to the main female character, Mary Carney, played by Nori Clancy, Abbey actor and wife of the director Fred O'Donovan. We can see her here in this image, not Fred beside her. Mary is the eldest daughter of Morris Carney, a wealthy tenant farmer, and she is described as being, and I quote, the sweetest girl in Ireland, struggling with the poor about her and making their troubles her own, end quote. Mary regularly visits the dying Nora Lahey, consoles the Breen family when they are evicted. She sets Bessie Morris on the right path when her head is turned by an unsuitable suitor and she turns away from the main suitor. And Mary is also shown, she's often shown frequently surrounded by younger girls who are kind of looking to her for guidance and help. She's always solicitous. Well established, excuse me, as being kind and charitable. In the opening section of the film, which this image is not from, I'll explain this image in a moment. In the opening section of the film, Mary meets and falls in love with Arthur O'Connor, who's played by Fred O'Donovan, the director of the film. Excellent choice of role for him. We only meet Arthur at the beginning of the film and at the end of the film, so he's got lots of time to be directing the film. What I want to talk about in this image is just how wonderful it is for, I think this is the second film that Fred O'Donovan had directed. And again, it's their first feature film and they're a long way from home. Because we really have kind of a nice depth of field here. The image is kind of a little bit murky. That's okay. We won't worry about that. We all watch silent film. But you have the characters in the foreground. You have the expanse of the fields in the background. Just behind, I cannot remember the name of that character. He's Nora Lahey's fiance, and his name escapes me for the moment. Just behind his hat, you see what might be what looks like a house or a dwelling, and then in the back you have Slieve them on. So it is a really good indication of characters being within a landscape, and a really good ability, I think, to capture a landscape. The film is very unusual in that the main female character, Mary Carney, and the male lead character, Matt the Thrasher Donovan, these Irish names, O'Donovan, Donovan, Matt the Thrasher Donovan, are not romantically linked as they are engaged to be married to other characters. As the film, like the novel, is interested in depicting the community of the fictional Knocknagow, it highlights Mary's kindness and Matt's goodness, and it is these qualities that elevate them to leading characters. They represent the best of the community. Matt Donovan's first appearance in the film is very dramatic. We see him ploughing his field with a horse with the Tipperary Mountains, again as a scenic background. The camera then moves to a medium close-up of Matt's face, and he breaks into song, with the intertitles giving the lyrics, and I quote, I don't know the tune, but I quote it, to reap and plough and sow and mow and be a farmer's boy, end quote. And in screenings of this film, this is an actor called Brian McGowan. He would attend screenings and he would sing. Apparently he was a very, very good singer. The character Matt Donovan personifies life and vitality in connection to the land. He is frequently shown to be, and again I quote from the film, the finest lad in the county, end quote. He is best man at Ned Brophy's wedding, for which he hires the tailor to make him a new coat. He shows kindness to Nora Lahey. He is the person who has the ceremonial role of beating the drum in Knocknagow on Christmas morning, which is an indication of his status within the town. We are offered examples of his sporting prowess. He leads a team in the sport of hurling. He throws hammer. And his reason for being so competitive in these sports is that he wants to win for the sake of old Knocknagow. Loyalty to his home place takes precedence. When he erroneously believes that his sweetheart Bessie Morris is unfaithful, he brokenheartedly plans to leave Ireland for America. Okay. He brokenheartedly plans to leave Ireland for America. So he is leaving Ireland because he has a broken heart for romantic reasons. We need to remember that for what's coming up next. The significance of these representations of showing Irish characters with an inherent dignity who are kind and compassionate to each other find an echo in the ideals of the Film Company of Ireland. Skipping ahead a little bit, on the eve of a visit that James and Nell made to distribute the films in America, on the eve of this visit in April 1918, James gave an interview to a Dublin newspaper. His remarks sum up the aims of this unique film company, which was to authentically represent Irish people on screen. and this is no small task in a world filled with dissipated and violent cinematic Paddies and Bridgets. Films featuring these stereotypical representations are numerous in the early period. The Bridget character is frequently an inept maid, excuse me, as seen in films such as Bridget and the Egg from 1911 and Bridget Bridgeteth from 1914. When James is given this interview before he leaves for America, the journalist kind of does a bit of context, a bit of summary of Sullivan's views, and the journalist states, and I quote, "He believes that from the cinema, very direct impressions of a country in all its aspects can be given to the world at large, and it is his hope to be worthy of properly representing Ireland to the other nations." And then he gives this quote from James himself. So this is James Mark Sullivan. And I quote, "We desire to show Ireland sympathetically, to get away from the clay pipe and the knee breeches, to show Ireland's rural life with pride in the same, to show Ireland's metropolitan life intelligently, depicting the men and women of the 20th century. In short, Ireland at its best in every walk of human endeavour." James is obviously aware of the power of cinema to represent, and he wanted to change the typical representation of Irish men and Irish women in the cinema. However, his modern vision of Irishness had a strong and meaningful link to older traditions and to the rich cultural heritage that anchors their modernity to their ancestors, not least in the connections between the approach of the Abbey actors and the film company. So while the film was made during political turbulent times, it reflects the novel so accurately that there was no overt commentary on current political events such as the Easter Rising. Again, something that would have been difficult to reproduce in those politically charged times. However, the choice of this novel, which focuses on the depiction of the goodness of the Irish people, resonates with the aim of the company to avoid representing Irish stereotypes on screen, and this in itself is a political choice. In addition, there are a number of moments when there is a political undertone which cannot be ignored, and most of this undertone refers to the so-called land question, the issue of the Irish tenant farmer, which dominated the Irish political landscape in the 19th century. The first of these moments occurs when Matt is leaving Ireland for America. It's been made very clear in the film that Matt is financially secure. He owns his own house. He can afford a new coat for a wedding. So he's emigrating because he has a broken heart. However, the sequence of him leaving Ireland is shot as if he was an economic migrant, forced to leave the country he loves. The director films Matt kneeling on a hillside and then standing and pleading, as you can see in this image, pleading and pleading and praying. He is in a silhouette in an Irish shot, making him an iconic figure. He is no longer Matt Donovan, but rather the representative of all the unwilling emigrants from Ireland. The intertitles reinforce this message, with the narrator stating, "What curse is on this land of ours when men like Matt Donovan are forced from its shores?" While Matt's farewell is, quote, "Goodbye, dear Ireland, you are a rich and rare land, although poverty is forced upon you." We see him setting off from his journey from outside his picturesque thatched cottage, a strong visualization of what he is leaving behind. That's his sister with him and Barney, who's helping him pack. However, in a matching scene at the end of the film, the newly married Matt and Bessie, yes, he gets her back, return to the cottage from America and are met by the now married Mary Carney and Arthur O'Connor and Billy Heffernan, the former sweetheart of Nora Lahey. Order has been restored and the Irish people are shown to travel abroad for reasons other than escaping poverty. There's another image in relation to uh, the Irish land question, and this is a beautiful image. I don't have time to talk about it because I want to move on. I know time is going. This is a beautiful image of a family kind of comforting each other after they have been evicted in the film. So the film did extremely well in Ireland. Unusually, it had its premiere, as I've indicated, in Clonmel, County Tipperary, rather than in Dublin. The reason being that the company wanted it to be first shown in the county in which it had been filmed. It was distributed in Ireland and England. It did less well in England due to the political situation of it being released during the War of Independence, and perhaps because both Nell and James were in America at this time, working to find a distributor for their films there. And it is to this work that I now want to turn, and what's happening to the film company in 1918. So in the spring 1918, Nell and James had sailed for America. Their aim was to find distributors for their films, particularly for Knocknagow, and to try and break into the American market. Their plan was incredibly ambitious. They wanted to reach both a general American film-going audience and a specific Irish American audience. And to this end, it seems that they had some success with meetings arranged with the Schuberts, initially a theatre company who also ran cinemas across America. And there was also some interest from the Pathé Film Company. To get a deal with either of those companies would have been a major coup for this small film company from Ireland. We know of this interest from letters that Nell wrote to her niece, talking about what was happening in relation to their efforts to promote their films. And again, I thank her granddaughter for allowing me access to those letters. It is significant that in those letters, Nell writes, Pathé wants to see our films. The word our is significant and important. It claims ownership of the films and of the company by James and Ellen as a unit. The films were theirs, they belonged to them, as they had worked to bring them to screen and to an audience. It was their company and their ambition which led to the establishment and success of this unique film company. I have a little timeline here of their time in America. They intended to stay just for a few months, but they had problems with visas and they stayed for much longer. The films got held up in the customs. Then Pathé Want to See Our Stuff from August. They had a screening in Boston that went on for a good few weeks. It was very successful. They managed to persuade the Catholic Cardinal O'Connell and Archbishop of Boston to come and see the films. He gives a great quote. I'll show you that now. And January 4th, we have Jim are making arrangements today with the Schuberts, and they had 4 children at this stage, and they were away from them from almost a year because of the problems with the visas. So I'll leave that up there as I talk my way through it. So they got the endorsement by Cardinal O'Connell. So their approach is very ambitious and multifaceted to distribution, indicating the determination of them to find success for their films. It was to be expected that as the only indigenous Irish fiction film company, they would approach the Irish American community as an audience for their films. But they were not content to stop at that audience, as they were looking for broad distribution of the films to the general audience in America. So this is the Tremont Temple, where they had screenings over the course of Christmas 1918 and New Year 1919. This is a picture of it from November 1918 and an indication of the ad for Knocknagow there. My research runs a little bit cold at this stage. I found other indications of screenings in Massachusetts, but I'll explain why it might have run cold as well. But I just have to give you the quote from Cardinal O'Connell. They were delighted that he came to the film and delighted that he gave them this quote to use in their presentation. However, their plans in America, and I'll end with this, their plans in America and indeed for the company as a whole never got the chance to be realised. In 1919, Nell managed to get her visa and returned to Ireland to be with her children and to nurse their eldest son, Donal, who had fallen seriously ill. Within weeks, both mother and son had passed away. Donal died in April. James did not make it back to Ireland to see him before he passed. And Ellen died on May 17th, 1919, at her family home in Limerick. Another bizarre twist in the story, her funeral in Dublin is attended by many of the ministers in the new Irish government, including Arthur Griffith and Cathal Brugha, and they are there as a mark of respect to her father and her brothers. Her work with the Film Company of Ireland does not get a mention in her obituaries. However, this is my last slide. Nell does receive a warm tribute from the bioscope, which indicates in the language of the time that she had a significant role in the company. After offering condolences and giving an accurate report on the death of Donal and her own death, as the reporter at this time does, he remarks that, quote, Mrs. Sullivan took a very keen interest in the business of the Film Company of Ireland and delighted to acquire an intimate knowledge of every detail of production. This is really unusual. I've read lots of kind of condolences in the bioscope to company owners or cinema owners on the death of their spouse. I've never read one that talks about the keen interest they take in the business. So I think in the coded language of the time, this is there. the film never covered, the company never covered really from Nell's death. They did make one other film. James sold the company to a group of businessmen. They made Willie Riley and the Colleen Bawn. I can talk about that in the questions, but I think I will wrap up now because I'm keen for questions, if that's okay with everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I feel like there's so much more that I'm sure you could have gone on for hours, but we have limited time. As much as I want to hear as much as I can about this topic, but we do want to take a little bit of time for questions, and we
Okay.
have some questions here. So okay, let's see. Lots of questions. Aurora, do you know anything about whether Nell Sullivan was mentioned to the press at all as a way to promote the Film Company of Ireland and perhaps even cinema more generally? I have in mind how Alice Guy Blaché was presented in the US as a respectable French woman, wife, and mother, which helped to legitimize cinema. Oh,
Brilliant question. Yeah. No, she wasn't. She wasn't mentioned at all, at all, at all. I think given the family that she came from, because they were so politically connected, because they were so upper middle class, even in her obituary, she is noted as being a good wife, a good mother, and kind to everybody who met her. There is absolutely no mention, which is why I wanted to pull out the bioscope there, that it's clear that, they knew what she was up to. But I think it's probably a bit of middle class shame, to be honest with you, and for Alice Guy and the situation there. But then again, I don't know if that's different because she was working within a film industry, whereas this was the Irish film industry at the time.
mhm. There's a few questions and comments as regards what Nell
Okay.
died of. I know we
Yeah,
have
good question.
discussed this together.
Yeah, good question. So the death certificate says enteric fever, which I had to look up because I did not know what that was, and it seems to be some kind of form of typhoid. But I read a lot around the flu pandemic of that time, and that was exactly the period when the third version hit Ireland. And it seems that a lot of the death certificates at that time, I think it was the flu. I think both of them went down with the flu. A lot of the death certificates at the time didn't put down flu because people really didn't die of the flu. Their heart hit because of the flu, or their lungs, um, and also very respectable upper middle class woman. It was considered that you wouldn't die of the flu. In Ireland, it was considered to be a working class disease. You got it because you were, poor and living in bad conditions. So I think I don't know. She might have died of enteric fever, but I suspect it might have been the flu. It just seemed to happen so rapidly. Yeah.
Yeah, and timing wise, I mean, it seems like the
Hmm.
most obvious
Hmm.
answer.
Yeah.
Matthias Smith is wondering if there is a complete filmography of the company's films.
There actually is a fairly complete one. Sorry, I didn't mention this in. Oh, what's it called? I wonder, can I pull it up? Um, this is embarrassing. There's a special edition of a journal on Knock na Gao, and it's going to jump in my um
Immediately.
jump in my face there now, and I see it. Sorry.
No worries at all. In a
Screening the Past. Okay, so there's a great journal, online journal called Screening the Past. Um, and in issue 33, April 2012, they have a full list of all the films. Yeah.
and in a similar question, Kevin Rooney is wondering if there's any current distribution of the extant titles. Is there a way that people can access these films?
Yeah, so the Great Irish Film Archive have both Knocknagow and Willie Riley, and they will um, I think they loan them out if you're, a bona fide research, but there's no distribution of them. There's no distribution of them. We don't have a DVD. We don't have them on streaming. Um, there is a free version available in the British Film Archive on their online. Um, so if you're based in the UK,
Hmm.
no, hold on a minute. I can watch that. So I don't know how far it's geo blocked or not. Um, uh, but on BFI online films under their free section, there is a version of Knock na Gao available there. So if you're interested in it, go and watch it. It's great. Yeah, it's great.
And again, slightly connected. Tom Gunny is wondering what the length of these features were. I mean, are they complete? I mean,
Very good question. Very good question. So initially, it seems as if Knock na Gao was released in about a 2 hour version,
oh,
possibly even longer. Yeah, just from looking at cinema listings, looking at what Jim Sullivan would say about it. Because boasting it's the longest film that's going to be made in the British Isles, and it's going to be over 9 reels in length, which would be pretty long. The version we have today is kind of standard an hour and 30, and I think the same is for Willie Riley, possibly a bit longer. The short films were short, kind of 1 reel, maybe 2 reels. They made kind of a middling length film called oh, When Love Came to Gavin Riley. When Love Came to Gavin Riley. Have I got that right? Um, that was about maybe 5 reels in length. 5 reels in length. So that was kind of the bridging film. Again, we don't have any of these films at all. Yeah.
from an archives perspective, so at the start of your talk, you were saying how no archive exists of this company. I'm from Ireland. I like films. I had never heard of this company before I spoke to you about it. So I'm wondering how you became interested in this company and then how you've been researching. If there's no existing archive, how have you put together this research? What have been your main sources of information?
Yeah, I guess so I did my MA in film, then did a PhD in film, and I think it was probably somewhere during the PhD um that I heard about this company, and I was horrified and shocked that, I hadn't heard about them before. And I get it, right? It's difficult to talk about a film company when you don't have the films itself. And then I started to read a little bit more about it and thought there really is a story here. And also we need to know about this company. It's part of our cultural heritage, I'm on a mission just to get the information about them out there, and then that'll be enough. Where do I find information? Newspapers, trade journals, building on the work of others, like I've mentioned. The great good luck to be put in touch with relatives. One relative, the granddaughter, and get the letters from there. Bizarre coincidences. People go, why don't you look at this archives? It's got nothing to do with anything, and then you find out something there. Um, Dogged determinism, just to keep going, and trying to kind of follow in the footsteps of um, great historians who are looking at women in this period and trying to follow their methodology, just try and uncover, doing a bit of speculative stuff as well, which you have to do, to try and join the dots when the record is just not there. Doing a lot of genealogy stuff. Spent an enormous amount of time looking at shipping records between America and Ireland and Liverpool and America, and yeah, doing all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it seems like the whole story is so intricately connected with the story of Irish emigration, like everything in our culture
Mhm.
is because we are a nation of immigrants. Um, but back to Nell, I mean, a woman working in this industry at quite a high level. Do you have any sense of how she was received by men who were also working in the industry, or has anything come up about how she interacted with her coworkers and contemporaries positively or negatively?
The vibes are positive. The
Yeah.
vibes are positive. There's like small comments made. So the office in Dame Street seems to have been like part office, part social space, part kind of gathering for anybody who's interested in what's going on in Dublin at the time, particularly I suppose, popular culture, if we could call it that. And more than that, because he had the Abbey actors there. And I think J.M. Kerrigan would spend some time there as well. Again, these are out of work actors in the summer. They did a little bit of touring in the summer, but essentially they're out of work actors in the summer. Um, and herself and James seem to be there all the time during the summer, just like they made so many films in the first year. I think they made 8. I know they're short, but they made 8 films, come from nothing, like from no experience. So from bits of comments from kind of the manager, from her nephew, from other people, She seems to be well liked and well loved, and it doesn't seem to be that there was any issue at all with the people she worked with, as much as I can tell. That she was a woman. They just seemed to be getting on with it. Yeah.
Interesting. And Carol Hopp just put up a question. Why did the company close in 1920?
Yeah, I didn't get to that at the talk, so very briefly. The heart went out of it when Nell died, I think. Okay, the heart and soul and everything went out of it when Nell died. James took the three surviving children and returned to America. He sold the company to a group of businessmen, but everybody who'd been in that first version of the company left at that time as well for different reasons, and you know, not to do with kind of Nell's death, but everybody had left at that time. So the businessman he sold the company to hired John McDonough to make the film Willie Riley and his Colleen Bawn. He also made a film called Dáil Bonds, kind of a fundraising film for the new Irish government. Um, and that was the last film. So that iteration of the company didn't have legs. And look, Ireland was changing so much at that time as well, and the film business was changing as well. It's another thing I didn't mention. They're bringing a European film to America in 1918. Okay, this is the time when the American industry is absolutely exploding, and it's kind of possibly more difficult for European films to get traction there. Which again, I think is interesting that they went to Pathé to try and get distribution with them in particular. So briefly, yeah, when Nell died, I think the heart went out of the company. James, obviously, there's such a romantic story. So she was buried in Glasnevin Cemetery in Dublin. I'm not sure why she's buried there and not in Limerick. He died much later. He died in the 1940s, I think, or 1950s. And he crossed the Atlantic one last time to be buried beside her. Yeah, I know. I'm only now beginning to be able to say this without
I
weeping.
know.
And the whole, yeah, the whole like she died. So when she died, everything the company just collapsed in lots of different ways, and then the next iteration just didn't have, I think, the same desire, you know, to keep going, or maybe there was other reasons. I'm just getting to that bit of the story myself, so uh, I'll tell you anything else next time I find out something more. Yeah, yeah.
Well, that sounds a good place to finish up. Is there anything else that you would like to tell attendees before we close out this edition?
Just thank you so much for being here, for listening. And if there is anything you might think that you might know about anybody possibly connected to this film company, please do get in touch. And thank you very much, Kathy, for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for taking the time. I know it's evening time where you are, so I really appreciate you giving up your Friday evening to be here with us.
Happy to. Happy
Great,
to.
thank you. So I just have a few notes before we finish up. First of all, I want to thank, obviously, Veronica for being here with us today, and to thank all of you in attendance. To keep up with San Francisco Film Preserve, please follow us on social media. We are at SF Film Preserve on whichever social media platform you favor. The next installment of Online with SFFP takes place on Friday, August 15th, when we'll be joined by journalist and author Pamela Hutchinson, who will discuss C.A. Lejeune, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Britain's early female film critics. You can learn more and register for this event by visiting filmpreserve.org/events. But for now, enjoy the rest of your Friday. Thank you so much.